Good morning, everyone. This is Jon Konings from ESC Spectrum Systems. We're going to talk about a regulatory update for the EPA and what's been going on in 2021. First off, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today. I know this cannot be always the most exciting topic to talk about, but sometimes it's important. We ask that you hold your questions until the end of the session because we might be answering them during later as we go through the sessions. We might be answering them for you. So at the end, we'll be reading your questions, and if you could enter them into the questions page section, we'll have someone read them off to me, and we'll do our best to answer them. So why don't we go ahead and begin? Again, this is a regulatory update, a new year, a new EPA, and a new look forward. Here are some of the high points that we'll be talking about today. Is the air regulation world changing? Yep, it is, and there are changes that are coming our new way. First, the new EPA under President Biden. We're going to talk about familiar faces in the world of climate change. How about that regulatory freeze announced by the White House? ACE or no ACE? One step forward and 3 steps back, it seems like nowadays. We'll talk about the ECMPS reengineering process. Is it still forging ahead? And what about cross-state air pollution rule that just recently was announced? And we'll talk about one more topic that I'm going to add to the session here. What about the scientific advisory committees? The EPA is revisiting the people participating in the scientific advisory committees. We'll talk a little bit about that. So let's move forward. First, the new EPA under President Biden. So far, the agency has given 2 signs that are topics that are very important to it. The first, of course, is climate change and its impact on nearly every aspect of our economy and our lives. Sometimes when people think about climate change, they think about melting Arctic caps and things like that, and the oceans rising. But really, it's also been manifesting itself the last number of years in severe fires. Wildfires in California and other places in the United States, plus Australia and other places, and also the really severe weather we've been having the last couple of years throughout the United States. These are all indicators of how our climate is changing through the capture of the carbon monoxide and other greenhouse gases. So along those lines, the U.S. has already rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement. That was done quite quickly early in the Biden administration. And these are goals or a protocol for goals to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Another area that the EPA has indicated that it is going to be moving forward with in a strong method is the environmental justice, meaning they're going to begin enforcing the existing rules and the regulations that are already in place. And this kind of implies the fact that people felt that the previous administration was not very strong in enforcing the existing rules and regulations. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. First up is under the new EPA under President Biden. Michael Regan is the new administrator. Excuse me. He's very experienced in air quality, more than 20 years of experience. He was confirmed as the administrator back on March 20th of 2021. He's been with both the EPA and several environmental groups over the many years and has a wide range of experience in this area. So he is an experienced administrator. Next, another familiar face is this woman, Gina McCarthy. She is the White House Domestic Climate Change Advisor. She actually served as the 13th administrator of the EPA under the Obama administration from 2013 to 2017. And before that, also under the Obama administration, she was the assistant administrator for EPA's Office of Air and Radiation from 2009 to 2013. Plus, she's held several other top environmental positions previous to those years in Connecticut and in Massachusetts. So she's a familiar face, an experienced person, someone that has been around before. Moving forward, we have another familiar face, this guy, John Kerry. He's the Special Envoy for Climate Change. Previously, he was the 68th United States Secretary of State from 2013 to 2017. Several times he's run for president, and he was the senator from Massachusetts for 22 years, from 1985 to 2017. So again, an experienced person, well-known in the political arena of Washington, D.C., well-known internationally and throughout the environment. So again, another experienced person. Moving on, let's talk about that White House regulatory freeze. And back on January 20th, the White House announced a regulatory freeze pending review. And what this means is effective immediately, it directed that no rule be proposed or issued in any manner until a department or agency head appointed by President Biden reviews that rule and approves it. They issued a memo. In the memo that they issued, it provided details of how this action would occur. And people would initially think, well, wow, this is quite surprising. But actually, it's a normal reaction. Most new administrations put a freeze on rules that have not been finalized yet. This type of action also was executed during the Trump, Obama, and Bush administrations. Remember, this action is for those rules which are proposed and not issued that are still in the regulatory pipeline. So will this action impact ongoing programs of interest to utilities and petrochemical facilities? Well, let's take a look at some of these and see what we think. The White House regulatory freeze, in my opinion, is it going to impact the ECMPS reengineering project? My opinion is it's unlikely to impact. That's because this reengineering of the ECMPS tool is something that the agency has been talking about for a number of years, and the utilities and the facilities that are impacted by it are also looking forward to it. It will improve things. It will make things more streamlined. It's a good move that all parties affected want and are looking forward to. What about the Affordable Clean Energy Program? Well, definitely in fact affect that, but let's talk about that on the next slide where we'll talk about it a little more closely. And what about methane reporting for the petrochemical facilities? And again, I believe it probably will impact it. And what about any other initiatives? And again, I think that they probably will have some impact, this regulatory freeze. I'm no expert in these areas, but these are just my opinions of what will probably happen as we go forward. Excuse me. Let's talk a bit further about the ECMPS reengineering progress. It still is moving forward, and the new replacement tool is currently called Easy In. But Chris Worley has said several times that he's more than willing to change the name to a more appropriate term, and so he's asked for suggestions of what should be called the new tool. I do want to point out that beta testing will begin soon, and the beta testing will be divided up to 3 phases. The first phase will be for the monitoring plan records, which will probably start in mid-November 2021. So that's later this year, we're going to begin beta testing. The second phase is for the quality assurance and certification records, and that will begin in mid-2022, or a little bit more than a year away from now. So next time this year, we'll be seeing some progress in this area. And then the emission records themselves, the third phase, will begin in late 2022. Now, at the latest presentation that Chris gave at the users group meeting back in March, he did say there will be no transition or gentle changeover. In other words, there will be no overlap between using the old system and using the new system. And the complete changeover to the new system will start in January of 2023. So it's very important that you participate in the beta testing that is occurring in 2021 and 2022 so that you get ready for the hard changeover or switch to the new system that's occurring in January of 2023. And then don't forget, in 2024, that there are new electronic records that are being added to the QA and emission files that are related to PM, mercury, HF, and HCl, and other provisions that will begin in Q1 of 2024. So Q1 of 2024, that reporting will be in April of 2024. And that will be the final step in this migration to the electronic reporting. The big question that I'm sure everybody has is, will Stack Vision and Prism be ready to accommodate the generation of the new files in JSON format. So at this point in time, I personally don't have an answer, but I expect both systems will be ready in time for beta testing later this year. Moving forward, ACE or no ACE. And I said here, it seems like we're doing the whole hokey pokey here, because there's totally uncertain about what's going on or even the existence of this program. And back on January 19th, prior to the swearing in of the Biden administration, the DC Circuit Court sent back to the EPA the ACE program to start over because the court determined that the agency had an incorrect interpretation of what emission reductions are acceptable. So this was a big change. It basically shot everything down related to ACE and other related programs. We did not really expect such an abrupt reversal just prior to the new administration coming into office. So we have to ask ourselves, is ACE dead or alive? And really the next question that we're looking for, are any of the states still moving forward? And we'd like to hear from you, and if you can comment to us, we would appreciate it. In the question section, are any of the states that you're operating in, are they continuing to go forward? Because there are several other things that have happened. For example, back on February 12th, the EPA issued a simple 2-paragraph statement trying to clarify the status of ACE. First off, it said the reinstatement of the Clean Power Plan makes no sense because under the Clean Power Plan, the deadlines for states to submit their plans has already passed. So that creates an issue of how to move forward. And here's a copy of that actual 2-page memo that basically outlines that the agency felt that the ACE program was non-existing. And moving forward, the February 12th memo went further and said the EPA does not expect states to take any further action to develop and submit plans under the Clean Air Act Section 111D with respect to greenhouse gas emissions from EGUs at this time. And they also went further to state that the emission reduction goals for the 2030 timeframe have already been achieved. So again, it kind of now falls back to wait to see what the EPA is going to do. But are any of the states themselves moving forward with this initiative? We know that several states had already issued their plans and what kind of emission reductions were appropriate and all this sort of stuff, but it certainly seems like there is no legal basis for anybody to do any additional work. So let's move on to a couple of the last topics. We did have another release on the cross-state air pollution rules, CSAPR. And on March 15th, the EPA finalized the revised cross-state air pollution rules, updating them to be in compliance with the 2008 Ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standards. These are the NAQ standards. They said basically starting in the 2021 ozone season, the rule will require additional emission reductions of nitrogen oxides, NOx, from power plants in 12 states, improving the air quality for millions of Americans. Well, this is interesting. You can see here in this next slide, the states that are highlighted in blue, they are the affected states that this ruling impacts, and that they need further reductions of NOx emissions from the power plants in these 12 states. And let me read off the list for you. These states include Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. And these reductions are required under the Good Neighbor policy provision, of the Clean Air Act amendments. And what the Good Neighbor provisions are is if your emissions impact adversely a neighbor or a downwind area, then you are required to reduce your emissions so that you will act in a manner that is considered to be a good neighbor in this situation. So let me just remind you that the current NAQ standard for ozone is 75 parts per billion. And people have been asking us already, well, what kind of reductions are we talking about here? Well, it's hard to say because there's actually a long process involved. Because of this legal action that took place in March, the EPA needs to revise its FIP, its Federally Enforceable Implementation Plan, which will then trigger each of those 12 states to revise their SIPs, their state implementation plans. And so this process is now being kicked off, and the states need to figure out what level of reductions are necessary from those power plants in order to become compliant with these revisions. So I don't think we're going to see any specific numbers in the near term, but it may take the EPA and the states a little bit of time to work their way through the calculations to determine what kind of NOx reductions they are talking about for these facilities. So moving forward, we've already sort of come to the end of our discussion here, but I do want to take a moment here before we talk about the last section and talk about the scientific advisory committees. Now, there are a number of scientific advisory committees the EPA has, and these committees advise the EPA on determining the science and the technologies involved and how to develop the rules, the regulations that impact the air quality regulations. During the previous administration, many people were eliminated. Many qualified subject matter experts were eliminated from these scientific advisory committees for various reasons. And specifically, let me give you one example. The previous administration said that if anyone was actually receiving funding from the EPA, that automatically made them ineligible to participate in these scientific advisory roles. And so the EPA then replaced these subject matter experts with other people who were, let's just say, less qualified to participate. And so now the Biden administration has reversed that, and just about anybody who was appointed to these advisory committees during the term of the previous administration have been removed from these scientific communities, and the EPA is going back and re-adding those subject matter experts who were previously not allowed, to bring them back into these committees so that they have the highest level of qualified individuals participating in these committees. And so basically it looks like we're re-injecting science back into these scientific advisory committees, which I think is a good idea, that we have the best people with the best experience on the cutting edge technology advising the EPA on how to develop their policies and move forward in a logic and intelligent manner. So in closing, we are curious to find out from you participants, are any states continuing to move forward under the ACE program with the Clean Power Plan? As far as changes coming through the EPA, we do expect some changes to be rolled out, but it's actually kind of early in the administration to guess what they will be and how they'll be introduced. So we're basically saying, stay put, stay alert, stand by. We do expect changes, but we're not sure exactly what they're going to be as of yet. So at this time, I hope we've answered most of your questions, and we're now open to take your questions. So Anna, do we have any questions?
I do have a question here. You had mentioned earlier that the EPA is taking suggestions for ECMPS, the name of the new tool, because EZN is a name they're open to changing. Where should people send their suggestions to if they have a suggestion for a different name?
Well, EZN is the working name of the new tool, and Chris Worley has said several times that that's just the working name, the temporary handle that they're using. But certainly, excuse me, certainly you could send it to Chris Worley at EPA.gov, or you can send it to me and I'd be glad to pass it on to you. And right now on the screen, you can see my email address. I know several people have suggested an alternate name for this tool, but certainly if you want to suggest a name, send it to Chris or send it to myself, and I'll certainly pass it on to them.
Great. Let's see on here. Okay, the only other question I have here is, are we going to do any more MATS related webinars in the next couple months? Is there any new information, enough in new information to have a webinar on that?
I had not planned on any webinars since nothing's really changed for quite a while. If you have any specific questions, you can certainly reach out to me again at the email address you see on your screens now, or give me a call or whatever else. I was thinking that after the beta testing begins in November, we might do some sort of a webinar in the December, January timeframe, just to update people, to remind them that the beta testing is occurring, that they need to take advantage of the beta testing period to understand how the new tool works and how it will interface with your data systems. And the agency has always said that there will be a lot of time available during the beta testing period to help you understand how the tool works and to hold your hand, as it were, to get you familiar with it and make you comfortable with it. That once the hard turnover phase begins in 2023, it would be more difficult to help you with your individual problems, because there will be thousands of people who will all be using the new tool at once. So to answer your question, yes, there will probably be another webinar in very late this year or next year. But in light of that, I really encourage everybody to get involved in the beta testing period of using the new tool, both for the monitoring plan records, the quality assurance and certification records, and the hourly emissions in 2022. I hope that answered everyone's question.
Great. I've got another question here. Do you know of any states still moving forward with any ACE-like implementation or enforcement?
I personally do not. I'm not aware of it, and that's why I'm looking to hear from you guys in the field. Are you aware of any states moving forward with the ACE-like programs for CO2 reductions at power plants? From what I mentioned about what the EPA published, it seemed like it's sort of a dead issue right now from the EPA, and we're still waiting to hear if they intend to do anything, but I'm not aware of anything on the federal level, and nor am I aware of anything on the state or local level. So if anybody is aware of anything, I would appreciate them speaking up during this webinar, or send me an email, and I would love to hear about what's going on.
I've got a comment here that Kentucky is no longer doing anything with ACE.
Ah, good. Thank you for that update. Anybody else?
While we're waiting for that, I have another question that I can actually answer. Surprise, surprise. It's about user group and if we have any dates. We did just send out a save the date email earlier this week. We've got SIMS and DOS training in Pensacola, Florida, tentatively scheduled for August 17th to 18th. And that is, again, tentatively scheduled for being in person. We've also got the ESC Spectrum Fall User Group in Pensacola, Florida, tentatively scheduled for November 15th to 18th, again, in person. We're just going to wait and see, and we hope that there will be maybe less travel restrictions and people will have vaccines, and just keeping our fingers crossed on that.
Yes, so thank you for those asking that question and providing those dates, Anna. That's glad you were able to share that with us. This traveling is certainly a personal decision for everyone. I myself, luckily, have been vaccinated for several months already now, but I know that the vaccine rollout is varying from state to state and location to location, and I'm hoping that by the August timeframe, that conditions will have changed where people feel comfortable traveling to Pensacola, both for the August sessions and the November sessions. People have already asked me about attending the Pensacola session in August, and I personally am not comfortable yet with flying, but I may choose to drive from my home here in Milwaukee, where I live, and take the 1,000-mile journey to Pensacola as a way of keeping me safe. Yes, that's
I've
going
got
to be a
another
long
update.
road.
Got another update here. It says South Carolina has also suspended work on ACE requirements.
Excellent. Thank you again for sharing that with us. Any other questions or updates about the ACE program in your state?
All right, John, I think that about takes care of it. Thank you so much for that very useful introduction to where we're going. We'll wait and see how it all turns out, but looks like it's a different era. It's definitely, there are going to be some changes, I think, coming in the next
Yes.
4 years.
We appreciate you taking your time to participate in this webinar, and certainly, you can always reach out to me. Again, my email address is on the screen at the moment. You can always reach out and ask me questions. That's what I'm here for. As I always say jokingly, Rachel hired me not for my good looks, because she thinks I know a few things. So I'll do my best in answering your questions and sharing my opinions, and hopefully I can be a resource for you. So with that being said, we look forward to talking to you soon, hopefully face to face. But as always, we're available anytime. Thanks much, everybody, and we'll see you soon.